Hey guys, welcome back for more tutorials. My name is Magnet, and today let's talk about using gateway armies in PvT. We're going to be basically talking about the general idea behind this type of style, some timings that you can use, and especially important is the transitions after you've committed to a style like this. This is basically going to be kind of a low-tech way to play PvT rather than trying to rush out super high-tech. It's going to be a lot more reliant on micro, on timings, and particularly winning fights with very limited tools. So a lot of people like to play this way. Like, there are a lot of pros that play very gateway centric, such as Huck or Stork. But let's go ahead and talk about these in the game if you want to check this out for yourself. This is going to be Alicia versus Bomber, and they are playing on Frost, which is not in map pool anymore. Not that that's really important, but we're going to watch Alicia kind of build up here. Now, if we talk about gateway armies, we can talk about timings first and foremost. There's a lot of timings that you can use on ladder. They're a little bit all-in-y, a little bit over-reliant on doing a lot with them. Alicia's going to Nexus first here, so there's really not a lot of one-base timings in this matchup, and I wouldn't recommend staying on the base for too long of a time. It's really just two-base stuff, so he's doing Nexus first, gateway into double gas. This is only because of the huge size of the map, and this is obviously a risk that he's taking, but it'll only speed up his build by just a little bit, so it's not that vital to this. But mainly we're going to talk about the timing that he hits against Bomber, and kind of show you the different mechanics of what he's trying to do. So he just produces a couple units here, Mothership Core. This is all really standard for the build, and he hasn't really committed to anything other than putting 2 out of 3 on each gas and not really filling it up. So if you go for a gateway-centric style, you can see he's dropping extra gateways well before any extra tech, and he only has this limited gas count. He did eventually fill one more in here, or he could have been on 3 out of 3 this entire time and I didn't notice, but I swear he was on 2 out of 3, but nevertheless, gas income is not a big priority in the early game if you're trying to run this gateway style. This is kind of the same way as you would do something against Zerg, in the sense that you would kind of just poke at them, kind of keep their army size low, and just fight on their side of the map in general to get a little bit of an advantage as far as the map control and the tempo type of game. So Alicia is building up here, getting a sentry, and any sort of gateway-centric attack is going to be all about sentries. So he's getting them sooner rather than later. You can see he's on 7 gates on 2 bases. He hasn't fully saturated this mineral line, and this is just a straight-up all-in that's going to try to catch Terran when they're not really expecting too much. So this is one of the more cheesy timings. I just wanted to show all the different options. I wouldn't totally recommend this because if you fail with this attack, then you're dead. But if you're the type of player that likes to play this way, we might as well cover it because it is definitely a possibility in PvT. So all the gateways are done. At forward, he does have 5 sentries. You can continue to warp in more, but once you're beyond about 5 or 6, there's not much of a point. And the reason you want to get them first is because they need time to accrue energy for force fields and for guardian shield. So you're typically going to want to try and break them with your first set of force fields, and then after that the force fields become less and less apparent, mainly because you've already used them, and your first one should be the most powerful set. So he's warping in some zealots here. He's on a lot of zealot sentry. You just kind of want to base your production based upon what kind of money you have. And of course, pylons back at home, very essential. He's actually a little bit behind on that. And when he comes up here, he hasn't really shown a lot to Bomber right now, and Bomber doesn't really have any idea what's going on. He has a bunker in the main because he wasn't able to scout very well, and for all he knows, he thinks this is Blink because he's seeing a Mothership Core, a Stalker, and a Pylon coming up here right now. If the Terran does have a bunch of bunkers right here, then you're probably not going to be able to do a whole lot with this type of timing, so this was mostly because Bomber just kind of misread this, which is why I say this isn't the most stable type of attack, but it still can work. So let's just get to the basics of this type of attack, and that is when you attack up here, you want to definitely lead the charge of zealots. You want to force field away bunkers, or at least force field SCVs away from bunkers so that they can't be repaired. And you want to drop a guardian shield because most of the time these are just going to be Marines. And Marines have very low damage. You can see their damage output at 0 upgrades is only 6. So if you use guardian shield, that nullifies all the Marine damage by about 1/3. So you definitely want to throw that up, and you want to try and break their bunkers as fast as you can. And really it's just a simple set of force fields, a simple guardian shield, and if you can bait them into the main, which is why this is going so well here for Alicia, you can just force field the ramp and then run sort of a contain on them for a little while. Eventually this is going to break down to where your sentries don't really matter anymore, your zealots are going to die, you're probably just going to have to win with stalkers and very occasional control things such as the time warp that we're seeing, such as the mothership, or rather such as force fields. So you can see all the zealots have basically died, but they've traded themselves efficiently. And from here, it's really up to you to try and kill him. We'll note that there's really not much of a transition back here for Alicia. He does eventually end the game, as we can see there. So this was kind of a really all-in-ish version of a Gateway Army type of build. I don't want to focus on that too much, so let's go ahead and jump into the next replay. And the next two are going to show us a little bit more stable styles, and especially games that do go longer than what we just saw. So this time we're going to be taking a look at Bling versus Happy. And he's going to open up with a little bit of a gateway timing, but it's going to be much softer than before. And it'll show you that you can open up with softer damage or softer builds and still do quite a bit with them. Whoops, I'm pressing the wrong button here. Got to get all these things up. So we're going to be watching Bling, of course, and he's going to be fighting Happy like we said before. And like I said, the first opening parts of your builds are always about getting this Nexus. There's not really a lot you should be able to do on one base, and you're really relying a lot on your opponent messing up. Because at least on two bases, when you're undersaturated, it can kind of oddly sometimes equalize into a normal game and you can keep going. But if your attack doesn't kill them and you're on one base, then you are really dead. Once they start getting things like stim and medevacs, there's really nothing you can do to answer that. So just getting up the basic units here, putting out a Zealot to stop any engineering bay blocks. As soon as he realizes that that's not going to be an issue, he does, or he could cancel the Zealot, but he decided to keep it considering the SCV was still there. And from here, he's not mining too much gas. Once again, you can see he just barely filled the second one up. And he's just dropping a few gateways. He's going to go up to 4, so he just dropped those extra ones. Getting a Stalker out on the map and a Zealot on the map eventually. And I swear there was a Stalker out. Yeah, there we go. So Stalker and Zealot are now on the map, and basically he's going to try to put down a forward pylon and see what he can do against Happy, because if Happy starts cutting corners or getting a little bit sloppy, then this is definitely a time where they can be punished. Especially if they open up for something weird like a really fast mine drop or something. The mines you can kind of limit their usefulness if you want to use things like just throwing one Zealot into the mine and letting it detonate. So mine drops and stuff are really vulnerable to builds like this. They'll eventually hold, but this build is good enough to the point where it doesn't require a lot in order to transition safely. I mean, we can even see just from the timer, this is a 20-minute game, so it's not like this is going to end the game, but it is going to put Bling in a decent position. So once again, force fielding the bunker to try and prevent repairs. If you can push them up their ramp like this, then this is a point where you can say, alright, this build's done its damage, I don't have to keep going if I don't want to. Of course, Bling can opt to if he feels like he can get good trades here, but the further up you push, generally the worse type of trades you're going to get. It would have been better for him to actually just sit down here on the bottom of the ramp rather than give this army away, which is kind of what he's doing right now. So, all things said, he did force the command center to lift up. He killed actually quite a bit of workers. Now his army's a little bit soft. And what I was going to say is earlier, if he just decided to not go up the main ramp, he could have actually just sat at the bottom here and force fielded if the Terran tried to come down the ramp. So he could run a little bit of a contain and maybe stayed there for another minute or so until stim or medevac start to finish up, and then he'd have to go home. But after this, you have to understand there's no tech back in your main, and you're going to be usually making gateway units by this point. So a really logical transition is going to be a Twilight Council and a Forge, maybe 2 if you feel like you're far enough ahead. And in this case, I think Bling could afford 2, but I think he's just going to stick on 1 for the time being. So, SCV in here scouting around, being annoying. Looks like one of the players must have disconnected. So as soon as he finishes that up, he starts Blink, and he's going to start up an upgrade here. Generally, you're going to want to do +1 armor, just so your Zealots can last longer and give more time for the rest of your army to survive. And eventually, this is going to transition into really heavy Blink Stalker, Charge Zealot, and oftentimes Storm, but I have seen people transition into Colossus eventually. So there's a lot of different ways this can go, and you really need to be smart about what you do based upon how hard you've damaged them. I have very rarely seen things like DT follow-ups after the Blink, but that's super rare, and it's just hoping that they mess up and don't make turrets. So once again, not really the most stable of plays. Now that the Blink is done, he's starting the Robo. He did start +1 and not +1 attack and not +1 armor, but he is starting +1 armor now. And off this Robo, another option if you wanted to stay on mostly Stalkers and Sentries, you can mix in Immortals, and we're going to count those as gateway units, particularly because they're not splash units, which is eventually what you need to get against Terran sooner rather than later. So you can kind of view the Immortals as a little bit stronger Stalkers, and they can fold well into gateway armies pretty nicely, but you still do need to eventually get into those splash type of units. We're seeing once again Bling with a little bit of a follow-up attack, and you can do stuff like this as well if you're able to get a good position. It's really all about your force field control, and at this point it's going to be about his blink control. But you have to understand, once again, you more than likely will not end the game if you only have gateway units, especially by this timing in the game, because he's going to have stim. He obviously already has medevacs out. The good thing that he has going for him is this blink, and it's going to be really hard for Happy to deal with the amount of stalkers that's here and the very pesky and annoying blink. So force fields come down first, and he can start microing his stalkers back if they start to get hit. And really, he's just trying to poke here. This isn't meant to end the game. Back at home, like we talked about, he's going to start getting charge and getting more upgrades. Still using his force fields to the best of his capability. You will want to blink your stalkers out of the way if they're holding up the zealots, though. And once again, he just tried for a good trade. Didn't really do him a lot of damage, but still, the income advantage is still well within Blink's favor. And he's still sticking for the most part on these super gateway-heavy armies. Finally, observers are starting. You can start immortals at this point. And this is also the point where he's decided to take a third base, mainly because he's realized that his blink and his sentry control and stuff has all been really good, and he should be able to hold for the rest of the game. He's going to start his Colossus now, and like I said, you'll eventually want to get into that. And I would say no later than about 14 minutes or so is when you really need to start looking at that, especially if you deal no damage. That's when you need to transition even faster than this. But by this stage of the game, Bling is at a pretty nice lead. He's up by 30 supply. He's still ahead in workers right now because of that earlier damage. So all in all, the gateway style has worked out, but it has ran its course. So he's going to start to switch what he's doing. And that kind of goes beyond the scope of this video. So let's check out one more game really quickly, just to kind of demonstrate a different opener in the sense that you can still run this gateway style and you don't necessarily have to plan an attack out like we've seen in the last two games. So this game we're going to see Sora versus Hack. This is going to be, at least I'm pretty sure there's no gateway timing in this. It's been a long time since I've seen these replays, and I've watched a jillion replays since I make a lot of videos, but we'll double check. But I'm pretty sure I included one that does not have a built-in gateway timing, that just goes for that blink and charge type of style, and it is still fairly strong. So Sora versus Hack, we're seeing this play out here, and once again Sora's first concern is really just going to be getting this natural basics or natural expansion established. Getting double gas here, kind of unusual. You can just do 2 on each gas, and that's what he's going to do for the time being. Pretty middle of the road type of expansion. Going to go ahead and grab that as soon as he's able to push this SCV away. He's also grabbing a Stalker and a Mothership Core, so this is going to be a little different. This is still to get this main base. Something you can do, and I don't think that Sora is going to do it, is he's going to float his Mothership Core forward to scout. You can also bring your first 2 units with this and just be a little scrappy. Maybe try to cancel this bunker, try to cancel this command center from getting down. Again, you're not going to do too much with it, but it's little plays like this that you might be able to roll into bigger and bigger plays as the game goes on. So it's definitely an option that we haven't quite seen yet. But more importantly, Twilight Council coming down, he needs to get this probe back to work as well. And that's going to be for a quicker blink. So you can do a little bit of a blink timing off of this, but again, you shouldn't be expecting to end the game with this type of army. So Nexus is finishing up right now. Stalker kills the Reaper. A little bit of an attack coming across the map here from Hack, and he realizes it's probably not going to do too much. And this is something we haven't seen yet. Like I talked about, going double forge in a gateway heavy type of style is definitely okay if you have good enough control. So he's going to go ahead and go double forge, and most of the time in the mid game, your initial splash is going to start off as Archons. But I have occasionally seen people that will survive on Blink Stalker, Charge, and Immortals for a while until they get into things like Storm. One thing you really need to be wary with is that this type of style is very vulnerable to mine type of play. So if they start getting up really fast in a lot of mines, then you need to start rushing out your counter to those mines, which is going to be things like Colossus, for example. You can counter them with, pushing forward, and as soon as the mines fire, you can blink out of them and make the mines miss, but that has a limited usefulness. Like totally tripping over myself. But the most important thing is you can't charge big clumps of zealots into mines. So that's one of the bigger styles that's really threatening the lifespan of this type of style. So just be really aware of that. Be aware that that's always a risk if you try doing a build like this. But if you're playing against a lot of Terrans that don't make mines, or they just want to do straight up Marine Marauder, then this type of style is still fine. Sora's grabbing his Robo now. Still on this double forge style. He can start mixing in Immortals here like we were talking about. And that's still very stable. So he does start Immortals. And this can be a good way to get into Storm as well and still be decently okay against the mines, as long as you don't just throw your Zealots away against the mines. Here's a little bit of an attack. You'll notice he does have very limited tools. He just had the overcharge. He hallucinated a Colossus, which was really cute. he donutted a bunch of units in that little area in order to kind of pin them down and limit the range of the Marines so everything else could kill him. So he's still pushing stuff away pretty well. And most importantly, this gateway style can actually just stop right here. You can stop here and just say, no, I'm not going to get charged. I'm just going to drop, with the same amount of money, by the way, I'm just going to drop a Colossus Bay and switch out of this right away. So if you just want to use this as a really strong opener with Blink, some Sentries, a couple of Immortals, that's going to be really good in this stage of the game if you can switch into Colossus and maintain your double upgrades, because if you get double upgraded Colossus against a Terran that's really only on like one eBay, or maybe they're behind in their tech or something, that's going to be when your armies are going to really start to scale very well. Well, notice that Hack doesn't even have a single upgrade yet, and Sora is already on 1-1. He's going to finish 2-2 before Hack even finishes +1 attack. So Sora is going to be way ahead in upgrades, and if you can be that far ahead in upgrades, then you're going to really crush armies, and it kind of ceases to matter your composition at that point just because your units are just so much better. So Hack is just now starting +1 attack. You should be chrono boosting these pretty heavily, and there we go. He's still adding on Immortals here, and I'm pretty sure he goes for the route of adding Charge rather than a Colossus Bay right away. But he is demonstrating the idea that these mid-game Immortal Stalker type of armies can still be viable, and once again you still will see some pros that do this quite regularly. Somebody that comes to mind again is Huck. He's always been known for staying on gateway armies for a really long time and not transitioning into tech very aggressively, whereas say a Protoss like SOS, for example, would transition into tech like almost immediately, or a Protoss like MC would transition pretty quickly. But MC is kind of all over the spectrum, so it's kind of hard to say. So continuing on with the build, 2-2 is now finishing up, and Sora is just going to plan an attack with this type of composition as soon as 2-2 finishes. Notice how he's not interested in taking a third, because if his upgrades are just so much better, it's going to be 3 sets of upgrades better, maybe even 4 if he gets there fast enough, but probably not. And he has 4 Immortals, a lot of Blink Stalkers, and a decent amount of Force Fields. And these are the type of builds you can mix in and you can get familiar with, especially if you hit these timings. That can be super strong, and it's really hard for Terran to deal with that if you have good Force Fields and good Blink control. So if you want to see Hack die, that's exactly what we're going to see right now. So a little bit of a drop going on here. Once again, it takes forever to clear these out because these Zealots are way better than the file that's being dropped. Attacks coming up here. Hack actually doesn't even really have that much back at home because of the drop. But the Immortals are going to be godlike. They will absolutely dominate everything here. You can see the Immortals, or rather the Marauders, just vaporize. And part of this was because he actually caught Hack out of position. There are a lot of medevacs with units out on the map. But even still, in a straight-up fight, he has way better upgrades, he has good force field control and good blink control. He should actually be able to win this fairly effortlessly. We're going to see this game end in the next little while. So this style actually isn't very vulnerable to mines like we were talking about. It's actually a very good anti-mine type of style if you see a lot of Terrans opening up with a ton of mines. But if you were to go for the transition of grabbing this charge and maybe grabbing a Templar Archives for Archons or something, that is super vulnerable to mine play. So just be aware of what counters what. And this type of play is actually not super counterable. Granted that he did not take a third base, so if they hold, then you're kind of in not the greatest of shape, but even still, this was a really great build out of Sora. Something we don't see too terribly often, but still plenty viable at the highest levels, and of course that will be viable for you if you can manage to pull it off. So, hope you guys enjoyed that video. I'll be back with more videos very soon. Of course, there's more Protoss tutorials down in the description, and if you have any questions, you can leave a comment. I usually get around to that, so yeah, check out those other videos, and I'll be back with more really soon, so take care.